Mama didn't raise this rude boy. He was raised in the dark. Mama didn't raise this rude.
Hi, this is the Nextmen and Gentlemen's Dub Club in session. We are at King's Crossroads Studios discussing how we made our track Rude Boy.
So yeah, we're going to have a look at our track Rude Boy, which was the first single from our album Pound for Pound. Nextmen versus Gentlemen's Dub Club, Pound for Pound. This is one of the first tracks that we completed for the album. I made the initial very basic beat loop and sent it to Toby and Johnny from GDC, and they seemed to like it, so we got together and worked on it, and basically the track went through several incarnations, but the initial starting point, I guess, was the drums and a few little samples and a bass line. So if I just play the drums, and
it
then
was like a loop, wasn't it, to start off with?
Started off as a basic kind of 16-bar loop. The drums are made up of separate sounds and a couple of loops in there, percussive loops. So we can go through it. Let's have a look. So there are 2 kicks. All being sent to a bus with a couple of plugins on them, really basic stuff. Cytomic the drop, using an MS-20 high-pass filter to just get rid of the really low frequencies. And then Camel Crusher, which is a free plugin.
You never tell me any of this stuff.
And basically, yeah, I used an EXS24 sampler for one of the kicks, and the other kick is just audio on the screen. But I ended up bouncing both of them to keep them as audio, just so I didn't have the hassle of, because sometimes when you transfer files from one computer to another, you can't find the EXS24 instrument. It becomes a bit of a pain in the ass. Right. Hi-hat, which is audio on screen. 1 snare, which has got various bits and pieces, a transient designer on it, bit of Valhalla. 2nd snare, bit of Logic EQ. Another little hi-hat. Kind of little effect sound.
It's weird, isn't it?
Another kind of dubby thing, which is from a sample pack.
It's like a spring reverb or something.
Yeah, but that's just in it. It's just a sound that I got. A loop, which is from a Prince Fatty sample pack. Just a bongo loop. Another separate hats that I programmed. Another little bit at the end of a bongo loop.
It's not there.
And that's it. And then I added a little guitar sample, which you can barely hear. And then a little saxophone skank, which is a separate little piece of audio.
They're quiet, aren't they?
And then initially it had this Juno bass in the chorus, well, just in the loop, which we ended up taking out and replacing with an 808. So this was the initial bass, which is a Juno 60 filtered sine, played with an EXS24 as MIDI, and I use R bass and a UAD 1176.
It's a go-to, that one, isn't it?
And that's how it started. And then we can talk about, we did another session then all together when Toby came in and a guy called Luke, who's a keyboard player from GDC, amongst other bands, and did a session to add some guitar and some keys. So we added a piano. Better turn this on silent, and
probably a good idea.
Now this was recorded using Luke's Nord stage.
Stage 2, yeah.
With Verb, which was inside the Nord and just DI'd into the interface. So it's really simple. And then a Bubble, which was also that was a Nord. Was it a Nord lead?
Yeah, actually,
or
that
a
might be the organ
Nord
off the lead.
Yeah.
Well, did we didn't replace them, did we? No.
I think initially I might have done piano in using a contact instrument inside the computer, but then we replaced it, and I don't have those the initial ones anymore.
Well, I guess the aim was to have like the programmed drums like nice and tight and kind of, you know, the feel that you get when you have loops going, but then to get the live effect of someone playing over it almost a bit more freely. And between those two things, you kind of get this push and pull, which is really, really effective.
So you can hear them both going, and then then Toby did some guitar, like a guitar skank. Oh, those two have literally both just got UAD 1176s on them, just tucking them in a bit. The guitar skank's got the UAD Galaxy tape echo on it for a spring reverb, and then just a twang reverb, very subtly set up in the guitar rig, bit of twang. And then there's also a part.
Why is it called the polka? Oh, it's quite polka-y, isn't it?
It's quite polka-esque.
Accordion out.
Quite often we'd use a guitar to double up the bass, just because it's a nice kind of overlay sound.
For sure.
A little bit of a vibe.
When you take the bass out and leave the guitar in, it still sort of implies the bass line without the weight. And then you drop the bass back in, and everyone goes mental.
And there's a couple of other things in here.
Sure.
A little xylophone thing, which was kind of xylophone, isn't it?
Don't know. Yeah. It's like a music box sort of thing.
Yeah, which would have been from Omnisphere. Just played in and then bounced to audio, so I don't know what processing I put on it.
Probably 1176.
Probably 1176. And also initially I put some kind of MIDI and sample pack kind of horns. So one they ended up being muted, but one of those was from just a random sample pack that I found, probably off Splice or something. And the other one was from Session Horns Pro, contact instrument that I just played in, added some delay, added the vinyl strip to make it sound kind of dusty and old, and then a bit of Echo Boy from Sound Toys. But that ended up being replaced by, you should talk about horns and...
Yeah, we went to my studio in Wood Green, recorded trumpet, tenor and trombone. Recorded them separately, actually, one at a time. And actually some of them we did together, but just for sort of practical purposes, it's easier to edit when you record them all separately. Yeah, so that was awesome, because Brad had already done quite a lot of the horn lines, and we'd done a few on Session Horns Pro, but it's so hard to find any sampler instrument that sounds like brass, and you always get a better result from getting people in. So yeah, that was really cool being able to do that.
And with those, that was just a kind of a few settings that you had that you'd used on the GDC album that we put them through. An API 2500 compressor, and then I added the decapitator, which I put on Punish for all horns, because I think they need to be distorted.
Punish all horns.
Yeah, basically they need to be distorted.
That's the concept there.
And initially, I think we used either a Valhalla Verb or the Galaxy Tape Echo Spring Reverb. But then, because you added effects from Prince Fatty setup, these at the moment don't have any verb on them. But then if you add the effects, that's a mixture. Yeah, you should talk about that.
What we did there was, once we got the recordings, we got everything recorded dry. I took all the stems to Evergreen and Prince Fatty's studio, where they've got an SSL and lots of different outboards. They've got like a, what have they got? Revox tape machine. He's got like a 50s spring, and what else? VRS parallel delay. Loads of different tricks, bits and pieces they've collected over the years. And I literally just had them all lined up and did passes where I'd have an aux sending to either a delay or a reverb, and just kind of play the auxes as I went along and record them back in. So then you just get the wet signal. And then I sent the wet signal to Brad, and then he just kind of finessed them a little bit so it wasn't sort of completely wild. And like bits when the vocals come in, it's probably better to leave more room for them to shine. So I think there were instrumental sections where the effects would come out more, and then maybe they'd be drawn back in a little bit when a vocal came in or a horn line or whatever.
I guess we should look at the vocals. So the vocals were recorded in 2 goes. Initially, we recorded Johnny's chorus vocals. They were recorded at my studio using a TLM 103 Neumann into a Focusrite. What is it? ISA 430 something? Yeah. Producer pack thing. Nice kind of transparent kind of sound.
1176. There you go.
Yeah, it's all the legacy stuff in this session, so it must have been before I bought stuff. Right. I used micro shift on his vocal, just to widen it a bit. A Valhalla vintage verb and Echo Boy, de-esser, RVox I always use, and then a bit of UAD auto tune.
Do you use the RVox do you use the gate?
Yeah. Gate and a bit of compression as well as my first compressor in my vocal chain. So yeah, the chorus vocal sounds like this.
Mama didn't raise this root boy. He was raised in the dark. Mama didn't raise this root boy. He was raised in the dark. And every single day he went to play. He stepped into the dance to make the darkness go away. And I said, Mama didn't raise this root boy. He was raised in the dark. Hey, they say my mama didn't raise.
And then Gardner's verse vocals were recorded by Gardner at his place in Bristol, just in his front room.
Nice.
Not sure of the mic, but then I used
laptop mic probably straight in.
Yeah, maybe. It sounds pretty good.
My bars are so
Yeah, no, it
UKB,
sounds
so
great.
well J.A. Man, original rude boy, they say. My lifestyle was lacking a way day. And I may say today's been a great day. My barber has gave me a great fade. And I keep getting smiles from the ladies.
So I used a bit of verb on them and the slap delay in the CLA vocal thing. De-esser, I used the glue. This one for a bit of tucking in. RVox, another 1176. Much drier vocal, but seems to. I like rap vocals. I think we all like rap vocals to be quite dry generally.
He was raised in the dark.
Hey, they say my bars are so UKB, so well J.A. Man, original rude boy, they say. My lifestyle was lacking a way day. And I may say today's been a great day. My barber has gave me a great fade. And I keep getting smiles from the ladies. Got peas in my pocket from payday. Keep stars when I played on the main stage. Told me every say pick up and safe mate. So I'm keeping it calm on the grey days.
Yeah, seems to fit in quite well in the track. But yeah, they were obviously recorded using different equipment at different times, but that didn't seem to make any difference. It seemed to gel together quite well. So after all this, after all these stages, we gave the track to Dom because he had some ideas of some additional production, little bits to add, little bits to just give it a bit of extra push, and yeah, maybe we should talk to Dom about what additional bits he shoved in.
I got the session off Brad, and I wanted to add some kind of higher frequencies that would cut through on big sound systems because the drums sounded really, really good. But I thought there was just this top layer that perhaps was not necessarily missing, but just to modernize it all slightly and make it sound good in a club. So I actually used this Pioneer's Therese SP16, which I really like. And I didn't MIDI it up. I played everything in by hand just as audio until it sounded right and then cut it up on the screen. And so, for example, the snare here is kind of quite a trappish snare, and it's got a lot of top end in it, and it worked really well with Brad's drums and just added that little bit of sharpness at the top. And the same with this open hi-hat, because these sound like they're from a completely different family to the rest of the drums in the track, but they do work within it really well. You can just hear that top. And when you're doing stuff like that, it's always about the right note. It's always about getting the right note. And I did that one here because it's so hands-on, this SP16, the Terrace, that you can just change the pitch of something really quickly and do it all by ear. So it's really simple and really straightforward way of doing it. And then at the top of the track, I wanted to add a bit more 808 work. So you've got these really kind of subby 808s that actually make it sound like the track's going to go in a different direction a bit. But once it all rolls in, it doesn't, and it sounds really good.
It's like testing the sound system out.
Yeah, literally, yeah, it is. And I toyed with actually making those an octave up so that the weight of the real bass, the core bass of the track when it came in was really strong, but there was something nice about kind of referencing it before the drop. So I left them as they were. And then there's this, which is a kind of classic reggae style thing, but I actually just played that. That's one note being played, and used the Dave Smith filter on the SP16 to give it that kind of like drive and that sweep, which really works. I thought it was a nice idea to get something properly analog in there.
It's kind of crazy sounding, isn't it?
Yeah, a little bit psychotic sounding. I think it's a good intro, good beginning. It feels like something's going to happen.
Yeah.
And then there's this horn stab. Again, it's kind of like much more of a hip hop, much more of a trap thing than a reggae thing. But in the mix, it just adds a nice kind of like front and attack to sections of the song. So if I skip to here.
Mama didn't raise this rude boy. He was raised in the dark. Mama didn't raise this rude boy. He was raised in the dark.
Yeah, so that's all working really nicely. And I think Brad covered this, but I did some 808 work because the bass was a different sound when it came to me. And I just felt like it needed to have this rounded kind of club sound to it, the bass. And I put a low and a high in. So there's a low which is just mono, and then the high has got a little bit of a spread on it. And I avoid putting spreaders on anything that's below 200-300 hertz because it can lead to problems in the mix. So I kept the low one mono and the high one wide, and it gave it a
My bars are so you.
Mama didn't raise this rude boy. He was raised in the dark. Mama didn't raise this.
That's also a good trick when things end up on the radio, because most people are listening through a very small speaker, a 4-inch speaker, or even on their phone. And if you're just dealing with subs, they're not going to hear that. They're just not going to hear it. So if you have an octave up in your bass, not necessarily very loud, but if you have it there, then you're going to feel the melody of the bass line even on a small speaker too. So we kept that in mind all the way through it. And Brad mixed it fantastically well. I mean, all of the mixes that were coming through, he obviously had a kind of technique going on, and every single track was just sounding fantastic. Yeah. I mean, there were very few mixed comments. Yeah. We checked it on everything really. NS10's great for mid-range always. The vocals are good. I mean, you were checking on your stuff.
The ATCs.
ATCs.
Yeah.
Old Fostexes I checked it on in the car, you know, the whole sweep, and basically there wasn't any trouble anywhere.
Yeah.
And a really good way of telling whether you've got a mix right is if the guy cutting it to vinyl says this is a really good mix. And I got the test pressing, put it on, and it sounded very, very similar to what Brad had done originally, just with that nice top end that vinyl gives you.
So that was how we made Rude Boy off our album Pound for Pound. GDC and the Nextmen. You can check us out online. Gentleman's Dub on the Instagram, Gentleman's Dub Club on the Instagram, Gentleman's Dub on Twitter. You guys are the
Nextmen official on Instagram, the Nextmen on Twitter.
And all the usual sort of Facebook. Just search us, it's fine.